So this video is about Mosfets. Mosfet means metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. And you can just forget about this. It's not relevant. There are a lot of Mosfets. Some of them are wired in from factory on and are poorly isolated. But the things are quite simple, so this is not a problem at all. This thing, it has like nothing that needs to be isolated properly, and it's quite big. This is the other side. There are standard size Mosfets. There are tiny Mosfets like this. There are very tiny Mosfets like this. There are quite complex ones. This one's broken. And there are very complex ones. But this is actually not only a Mosfet. And we will talk about that later. Okay, so I just removed the isolation from the middle tiny Mosfet for you. So, you may have noticed there is a signal wire. The signal wire is needed to get a signal from the switch to the Mosfet. And what the Mosfet does is you connect your battery, you pull your trigger and the switch goes off, and then all the energy goes over the Mosfet and not over the switch here. Which means the switch will have a significant longer lifetime because there is no erosion or sparkling or anything else. All the energy, except for a little tiny signal energy, goes over this Mosfet without sparkling, without erosion and stuff. What you may have also noticed is the following. The red cable actually does not go through the Mosfet. So the Mosfet itself is just between or into the black part of the wiring. This is minus, negative. And we have only one point for a signal wire here. This is the most basic form of a Mosfet, but it's how all these Mosfets work. So what we need is somehow to detect the connection. If the switch goes off, some metal part goes in here and connect these two. And what we need is to send a signal. This happens to this Mosfet. We cannot do this with only one signal wire. Makes sense, doesn't it? But we can do this if we connect the red wire somewhere with the switch. Some Mosfets do this with a second signal wire. Some are just soldered in like this, and the red wire just taps on the switch. But how benefits this whole wiring mess? What are the benefits for you, for your gun? This is actually with a lot less resistance than just punching in a piece of metal into your switch. This is way more precise. Your rate of fire goes up a little bit because you have less resistance. your trigger response goes up a little bit. Well, if your rate of fire goes up, your trigger response goes up. That's of course. But also the energy comes to the motor a little bit faster. The moment the thing gives a signal, this MOSFET just opens the way completely. It's not just shoving in metal and giving it a perfect fit one point, and before that there is just a little bit of energy flowing. It's full energy flowing from the point on. This thing gives a signal. So, as I said, all of these are kind of the same. So, let's look at this little one. I may have lied to you. No, I don't. I do not lie to you. Look at this. 2 signal wires going in here. So I lied, definitely. But let's check this. These signal wires just actually, let me cut this away. For a tiny little thing like this, there's quite a good bit of isolation on there. So, okay, so let's look at this. This signal wire actually doesn't go in there. We have the same thing. 1 signal wire to the MOSFET. Black wire in, black wire out. And where does the other one go? The other one goes here. Let me cut this away. You can already see this. It goes to the red part, somewhere on the red cable, as I told you. This is the variant where you solder it to your plug. Why ever you should do this? It's probably more easy to do this somewhere else, but this thing comes out of an AK. So the AK looks like this. Here's the trigger. This is the receiver. Here's the Mac in there, like a banana. And you place the MOSFET here next to the hop-up chamber, and then all around this stuff gets wired next to the gearbox. You plug your battery in, you lay it all up there into the gas tube, and these go down to the motor. So, very easy one. All the same thing with this Crytek MOSFET. Looks a bit different, but it's the same. So what we got here is the red wires are actually not on the same spot soldered, but there are 3 spots on this Crytek special super switch. Crytek guys, very smart, they thought, hey, if there is no connection, this thing will not shoot. So they added a little piece of metal to the selector plate. And if the piece of metal isn't on here, we have no connection between these two. Or possibly, let's check it, between these two. Okay, it's actually the 2 red ones, which is kind of stupid, because what we wanted to do with the MOSFET in the first place is reduce resistance. What we did here is to go for a little metal plate. You may remember a little metal plate goes in here. If you have no MOSFET, all the energy goes over this. And all the energy has to go over this little metal plate, which goes, I can simulate this, like this over these two contacts. This kind of annihilates all the positive effects of this MOSFET. The only thing, or wait, let's say 60%. The good thing is you can shoot quite fast semi, because this connection is already established when you're starting to fire. So there is no need to connect the moment you want to fire, so there is no sparks going off, I guess. I hope so. But this is actually a point of high resistance and there will be a lot of heat, which is terrible. Okay, so, but the principle is the same. We have this MOSFET. We have the connection from the motor, goes in here. And this is the way to the battery. I just cut at some point. Don't know why. Possibly it was annoying to get this out of a gun. This thing has a little, I don't know whatever this is. I don't think it's for active brake, but I'm not sure. Possibly it is. Active brake is another thing I will explain later. Alright. Active brake. This is complicated, isn't it? This is in Paron AB active brake MOSFET. It's broken because the signal wire is off. The signal wire is actually, yeah, a bad one. Very, very small amount and very, very thin wiring. So this broke off because of mechanical wear. The thing is, this one is very complex. You can adjust the amount of active brake you want to have by pushing this little button. But actually, if you look close, this thing is nearly the same as all the others. Because this red wire here goes straight through. Which means we have, like all the other times, this we need a connection thing. But for the active brake one, there is a second MOSFET on this thing. There is a MOSFET which is triggered the moment the energy stops flowing and then sends an impulse to the motor to stop him. Active stopping of the motor. Which means the motor will get hotter, but it will actually have a more precise cycling, because after the power cut, the motor stops or gets stopped with a little bit of force. This actually means we're giving an impulse of energy to the motor from the wrong polarity. It's not quite as we are shortcutting the motor, but it's close. And it's a very, very, very short impulse. But yeah, it generates heat and it may help you with cycling or overspin. If you have a gun with a high-speed motor and which is shooting very fast, it may be possible to overspin it. So you're pressing the trigger, 2 shots, 3 shots are released, and it's actually semi. And yeah, an active brake MOSFET may prevent that if the active brake is strong enough. So this one, you can actually tell it how much active brake you want to have. So this is quite complex. What I wanted to show you on this one here is that it has quite good cables on it. This is something Paron does very good. These cables here this is not original Perron wiring. This is original gun wiring. These are fucking bad. Gonna show you very fast. So this is the wiring from the gun. These cables are very hard. They hurt a little bit. These are Perron's original wires. These are very good. I can just get off the isolation and I can show you copper wiring, a lot of very, very tiny wires. This is actually so soft you could stick it into your nose without hurting you. And this is my definition of a perfect wire. If you can just stick it into your nose and it won't hurt. This is perfect. This is copper wiring. There are wires like this who got a little bit of, I don't know if it's actually silver on it, but it's not copper. So these are a lot more pricey, but they are a lot better. Not just in terms of mobility, but in terms of resistance. And this gives you a way better rate of fire and a way better trigger response. And it's more easy to lay these cables, and it's more easy to place your battery. And the only thing Perron fucked up with this are these signal wires, cause these are very hard. And if you move around the MOSFET a lot, the signal wire will come off. And the guy who soldered in this thing just, I don't know what the fuck he was thinking of. This is the end of a signal wire soldered to a part of an original wiring, and this is completely stupid. This doesn't make any sense. So this is the original packing. The MOSFET comes like this, with the little JST plug on it. These are bad, but it's fine to use it just for signal wiring. So normally you go with the other part of the JST plug and there and just do your wiring thing. And yeah, he did it somehow. It's not too bad because there is not a substantial amount of energy going through this. Whatever. You may have noticed there is one signal wire here, a little tiny one, going from the MOSFET to red. So this is the difference between an active break MOSFET and a normal MOSFET. The red wire needs a connection with the MOSFET itself, not with the switch. Or with the switch, also with the switch. In this case, they did it somehow on the board, but normally it's built like a regular MOSFET. One signal wire to the switch, one signal wire to the red, and another tiny point on the MOSFET needs to be on red. Sounds complicated? It is. Most of the time you don't need active brake, or before you go for an active brake. Okay, sorry for the cut here. My cam died, so yeah. I have no fucking idea what I wanted to say. Ah, yeah. If you're on the point needing this active brake MOSFET, you should consider to just buy a processor unit. which I will show you next. Okay, so this is the actually quite crappy ICS ETU named the SSS system, which sounds like a strange German unit from World War II or something else. Whatever, the cables are crappy and quite thin. This thing doesn't withstand rapid semi-fire, or the first versions didn't. I just throw these out. But the principle is all the same as all ETUs ever are. You have something like micro switch or a sensor of any kind, like a light sensor, magnets sensor, an infrared sensor, like something like that, to get a signal from the selector plate, so you can choose your fire mode. And sometimes you can also check if the gun is on safe or not. This thing just does one signal, semi or auto. Then there are two more signal points. One is for the trigger, I guess it's this one, or this one in here. There's one more. I'm not quite sure about this. I got it out of a gun like a year ago and I have no idea. But anyway, you need one signal from your trigger and you need one signal from your cutoff. Your cutoff comes from this sector gear. This little notch here needs to be or let's say this little notch is the one you need for mechanical brake. A regular system uses this thing to disconnect your trigger from your switch. This is the gear which just gets your piston and releases your piston after the half row of teeth is over. Some ETUs just measure this with like a light sensor to count these teeth, or to check if there are still teeth coming or if the row is just ended. Some just check this thing with a light sensor. Some do a light sensor like this, and also check if there are teeth coming. Anyway, you need some way to determine if your cycle ended. And then most ETUs just give your motor active brake and stop it. And good ETUs you can program, like an Perron hybrid or an Gate Aster or something like this, or an Titan or an optical or what the fucking ever. And this one is actually quite crappy and you can do nothing, but what it does is it detects your cycle and then stops your motor, and most of the time these things work like a charm, and if you have an overspin they automatically increase active brake, which is good. And you should definitely consider to buy one of these, or not the ICS one. You should consider to buy an Perron hybrid or an Aster if you can't get the Perron hybrid for an version 2 gearbox. For an version 3 it's the other way around. I would say you should buy an Aster version 3 and an hybrid version 2, depends on your gearbox. And this is a way better option than to go with some kind of active brake Mosfet where you can't actually know how much active brake you have and you need, and there is not that much of a difference in price, except if you build your active brake MOSFET yourself, which is quite easy. There are a lot of quite good tutorials out there.